Let's go through this, finding domain and range, okay? Domain and range. I'm gonna go through this as a student would. So, domain of a relationship shown here is all x values between 0 and 4. So, okay. So that's the domain from 0 to 4. Now let's draw the range. And I will use green for the range. With the range, we look for the y-axis. So I'm going to go to the lowest point on the y-axis in the graph, highest point, and that's your range of the graph. So that's what it looks like. Here we have Tatiana says the domain of the relationship is all values between x values between -3 and 3, and the range is all y values between -2 and 2. So let's see what that looks like. The domain is all x values between -3. So 3 and 3. So I'm going to draw that. All right, let's go to -3 on the x-axis, and let's go all the way to positive 3. Well, we got a problem right there. Because she says the domain is all x values between -3 and 3. Well, clearly, if that was true, this circle would have to extend all the way to the end of this line, which it doesn't. So she is not correct. As a matter of fact, if we look at a range, we'll see that she actually got them switched. Because if I look at the range going from -2 to 2, we haven't covered the whole range. So we overshot the domain and undershot the range. So is she correct? The answer is no, she is not correct. She got them switched. So she mixed them up. That's what she did. All x values between, forgive that, don't ignore that line there, from -2 to +2. That's the domain line there. Values between -2 and 2. All right. And it looks, yeah, and it includes both of them. So if I was going to put this in our new notation, we're going to be talking about interval notation. It would look like this. I'm going to include -2 to 2. That's interval notation. That's what we introduced interval today. Interval, not inverval. Well, that's what that looks like. All right. So what about the range? No, all we're talking about is the domain now, not the range. So I'm actually going to get rid of this part. So the domain is all values between -2 and 2. In interval notation, it looks like that. So the range is, that's the range of the line, okay? Pretend that went all the way to 0. So if I was going to type this out in words, so the range is all y values what two numbers? 0 and 4. So if I was going to write that in interval notation, I would need a bracket, a 0, comma, 4, and another bracket, including both those. So that's what interval notation will look like. Okay. All right. So which of these statements are true? Select all this, apply. All right. They're asking about a domain and a range here. All right. Now, understand that this graph, this line continues. It just ran out of space, but there are no points there. So this line continues to go. So that means my domain is the entire X line. So I'm gonna draw that. So the domain in this graph is the entire X-axis. That means it's all the real numbers. So click, click. All right, so that's the domain. What about the range, right? So the range is from -4 all the way up to infinity. So that means it is y is greater than or equal to -4. So that's the range of that graph there, right? And yeah, so that's how we would describe that graph. Let's fix this. Always says the domain of the relationship here is x is between 0 and 1, but that's not correct. Let's look at the range of this line. All right, I mean the domain of this line. I'm going to draw it. So looking at this curve, sorry. All right, it starts here and goes, stops there. So what is the domain of this line? I'm going to change the starting point from 0 to -5. And I'm going to change the ending point of the domain to +3. And now, if I submit that, you'll see now the whole entire curve is highlighted. Okay, so let's do the domain of this graph. So that's the domain. Domain is from -2 to, +2 to +6. I'm going to say +2. I'm going to write, and because there are no open circles, I'm going to let that be less than or equal to x, because it's the domain. I need another 2. I need an equal sign there, and I'm saying it went all the way to 6. And that's my answer. That's the domain of that graph. Okay. All right. So that's the domain of that graph. On the range here, and it goes up forever. All right. The range y greater than equal to, where did we start? It looks like we started at 1. That's the range of the graph. Okay, let's build it. Domain needs to be between 1 and 3. So I'm going to 1 and 3. Range needs to be between 2 and 7. So I'm going to stay on there. 2 and 7. Check my work. There it is. Notice that the range, look at the domain of the graph between 1 and 3. And the range is between 2 and 7. Gotta look at the x and the y. Let's try one more. Let's drag it upon, let's create it a graph where the domain is between -4 and 2. So let's go to -4 and 2. All right, so there it is. And let's see if I can get my range between there. Check my work. That's correct. All right, so that's going to end this video.